All right, good evening. You might take your Bibles and turn to 2 Kings 5. That's where we're ready to start tonight. We're almost at the end of the chapter. I think we made it down to, verse 19? So we're ready to start at verse 20 in just a second. By way of introduction, I don't have my timeline up. We're still in the same place we were. We will be at least till the end of chapter 8, basically, on the timeline. Chapter 9, things change quite a bit. I have to go to a whole new slide on my timeline. Everything changes. So when we get there, we'll bring it back up. But right now, we're just in this period where we're looking at a lot of things that Elisha does. And especially tonight, we're going to start looking at a lot of engagements. Well, we really did this when we started with Naaman, looking at engagements with the Syrians. And there will be a lot of that in the next couple of chapters. So we don't really have to get through a certain amount tonight. We probably should be through chapter 8 or so. But if that doesn't happen, that's okay. We'll make it work. Our backup plan is I just preach the book of Joel. And I'm just going to preach it like Joel did and just read it. And that's it. No, I'm just kidding. I'll probably say some things about it. You know me. I can't just let Joel speak for himself. I got to say something too. All right. So let's go to chapter 5 and verse 20. You have anything you want to say by way of introduction? Well, we're dealing with Naaman. Naaman's been healed of his leprosy in this incredibly miraculous way. Basically, Elisha refuses any payment for the service. And I don't know all the things that he's trying to clear out of Naaman's thinking with that. I don't know if he's trying to, a lot of the ancient gods, you basically had to bring the stuff in order to get the dividends, right? And I think that Elisha is trying to dispel that vision of God out of Naaman's mind. And I think he's trying to dispel the idea that Elisha is just a prophet for hire, that if you pay him enough money, you'll get what you need. I think he's trying to erase both those conceptions. And he does. But then notice verse 20. Then Gehazi, the young man of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, "Behold, my master has spared this Naaman the Aramean by not receiving from his hands what he brought. As Yahweh lives, I will run after him and take something from him." So Gehazi pursued Naaman, and Naaman saw one running after him. So he came down from the chariot to meet him and said, "Is all at peace?" And he said, "All is at peace. My master has sent me, saying, Behold, just now 2 young men of the sons of the prophets have come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothes." Then Naaman said, "Be pleased to take 2 talents. And he urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of clothes and gave them to 2 of his young men, and they carried them before him. So he came to the hill, and he took them from their hand and deposited them in the house. Then he sent the men away, and they departed. But when he came in and stood before his master, and Elisha said to him, "Where have you been, Gehazi?" He said, "Your servant went nowhere." Then he said to him, "Did not my heart go with you when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Is it a time to receive money and to receive clothes and olive groves and vineyards and sheep and oxen and male and female slaves? Thus the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and to your seed forever." So he went out from his presence, a leper white as snow. So notice that Gehazi wants to receive the pay. He thinks it's foolish that Elisha wouldn't receive it. He chases down Nehemiah to go get it. And Naaman is so generous and so thankful that he even beats what he's asked for. And then how does it end up? How does Gehazi end up? He ends up as a leper. So you've got Naaman, who is a leper that ends up cleansed, and you've got Gehazi, who was a cleansed man, or a pure man, or safe man, who ends up as a leper. He may have 2 talents of silver, and he may have 2 changes of clothes, but that's not going to matter much, just like Naaman's position of prominence didn't matter much for him in all of that. Now, he will show up again later, and so I have maybe some questions about how all that works out. But perhaps this leprosy is maybe not as intense as the one that Naaman had. I think that's possible, that it will just be kind of a lifelong condition. But Ms. Karen asked the other night about Naaman not having to observe the cleanliness boundaries. I'm not sure that that's being observed with Gehazi later. And so that's an interesting thing. Maybe he's able to conceal it somehow or something like that. But we can talk about that more when we get there. What would you like to say about the end of 5?
Well, well, this does show us how strong the lure of money or is on people. Yeah, and that desire makes people do things that they shouldn't do, or just bad things, I suppose.
And somehow he gets the idea that Elijah wouldn't be okay even with him taking it, going and getting it. And so he tells him, that he lies to him, and says he didn't go do it and all that.
Yeah. Some people use the appearance of religion for gain. And, I don't. Why do people do that? And I already mentioned the lure of money, but it's mainly selfishness. It's and no consideration for others. And there's verses warning against those things, but we have great examples of men that didn't do that, and that helps us. And I suppose you could say a lot about lying there, about him telling the lie there.
Both to Naaman and then to Elisha when he comes back.
Using one lie to cover up another lie, and just compounds there.
It works out real badly when your person you're lying to is a prophet.
Yeah.
You can see everything that happened.
Gehazi there, he might have thought, if I just take a little bit and not take it all, it won't be so bad. Or maybe he just said, at least I didn't take it all.
Yeah. That's right.
But,
our actions can also affect others. We have to see his family.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
You and your descendants.
He's got a very short-sighted view of what's going on. It's very earthly. It's very selfish to come out. It's like, this is just going to affect me, possibly. It's like, nope, it's long-lasting and affects him and others.
Yeah.
And he thinks it's going to bring blessing and brings curses.
Yeah.
And so just basically everything he thought about it was exactly what he said.
That's right. Yeah, and maybe he was thinking of this in terms of like legacy for his descendants. Wow, how this would change my descent. Well, it did change his descendants' outcomes, but in a bad way.
when Elisha confronts him there, he asked him, where have you been? Well, he knew where he'd been.
Mm-hmm.
And he told him it wasn't time for him to be doing such as that. Why do you suppose that? That he told him that it was not a good time for him to be doing that.
That's a good question. Because when would have been a good time to do it?
Well, there wouldn't have been a good time,
Yeah.
I don't suppose, but I suppose he was thinking about the influence that he may have had by doing that way.
Yeah.
He might have destroyed the influence that Elisha had there on Naaman.
It is at least interesting to me that he doesn't say Elisha changed his mind, like he decided he wanted that money. And instead, he's saying, well, these two prophets came in and we want to take care of them, which, like you said, he uses religion as a way to cover it. It's kind of like the health wealth gospel that says, if you contribute this much, you'll get this much back. And these men have been able to build multi-million-dollar estates because of this kind of false promises of that. And maybe that's kind of what Gehazi's working at here too.
Yeah. Well, like I said, destroying the influence there. Christians they're held under a microscope, and people are looking for something to label you a hypocrite.
That's right.
For sure.
That's right.
Showed a lot more lying does, but it's still today. People we see when the sin happened then, they're immediately punished for the day it's going to be the same. I mean, we're the lying because I think Larson brought up talking about Ananias and Sapphira lied. I mean, they're immediately it was them, and I think we need to think about that now too. When we make those same mistakes, just in a different way.
Yeah. Well, and you think about his position in connection to Elisha and how much what he says is going to be. I mean, there are times where he is literally sent as a messenger for Elisha's sake. And now he's going in on this. I mean, I imagine Naaman walks away thinking that's actually what happened. We don't have any record of him encountering Elisha again. And so, maybe Elisha clears it all up or something, but I don't know about all that. All right. Anything else through chapter 5?
No, like you mentioned, he comes up again in chapter 8. And,
Yes.
And he's telling the story of Elisha.
Yeah. In a good way.
Yeah, in a good way.
So maybe he learned his lesson. I don't know.
Well,
We'll see.
we could read a verse about that.
Yeah.
Destruction of the flesh.
Yes, that's right. Okay. You want to take us at the beginning of 6?
Okay, we're through verse 7 there, chapter 6. Now the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, see, the place where we dwell under your charge is too small for us. Let us go to the Jordan, and each of us get there a log, and let us make a place for us to dwell there. And he answered, go. Then one of them said, be pleased to go with your servants. And he answered, I will go. So he went with them. And when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. But as one was felling a log, his axe head fell into the water, and he cried out, alas, my master, it was borrowed. Then the man of God said, where did it fall? When he showed him the place, he cut off a stick and threw it in there and made the iron float. And he said, take it up. So he reached out his hand and took it up. Back in chapter 2, when Elijah was taken up, we saw that there was 50 of these sons of the prophets that were there. And then in chapter 4, the number is 100. So it appears they're growing, and they're having trouble feeding them there in chapter 4. And now then they're having trouble housing these people, these sons of the prophets. That's a good problem to have, especially for a good sound church. So these men, they take it upon themselves to build a bigger place. No complaining, no fundraisers, and I suppose these were younger men and inexperienced, because they do ask for help from Elisha there. And here an unexpected problem arises. Stay calm, and let the Lord handle it. You may want to say some more about the axe head there.
Well, evidently, at this moment in time, the iron axe head would have been pretty expensive, right? So, I mean, if I borrow somebody's axe and the axe head flies off, I mean, I don't want to do it, but I just go buy them a new axe, when we move on. Now, actually, I watched that show Alone, where they put the guys out there, and I looked up some of their axes because I got real excited about it. And if you look up the axes they use, that's not something I would just go buy another one and replace it. I would be crying out for an Elisha to help me find the axe head, because those things are pretty high. But at this time, this would have been considerable debt for this man to be in, to have had a borrowed axe head and to have lost it, and basically the inability to replace it, I think. And so that's why he cries out to Elisha over this, I think, more so than maybe we'd say, what's the big deal about an axe head? Just go get another one. Well, that wasn't quite as easy in this time, when iron is maybe a newer production, or even a rare production, even if it's not that new. But the fact that he's able to do it. And, I think one thing that I would say about this, I use this as an example sometimes when people talk about, crazy stories in the Bible, making an axe head float. You can't. And what I would say is, if we anchor ourselves in the narrative of the scriptures, we understand that God is, right? That he made the world. If we start there, then there's no ridiculous story. Right? It's like, whatever he wants to do, we can make it happen. And so I think that helps kind of anchor us, because, somebody who says, well, I believe the Bible if it wasn't for all those crazy stories. Well, once he's created the world, what's out of the possibility? What's out of the realm of reasonableness? Nothing, right? And then you add into that Jesus Christ raised from the dead, then looking back at that through that lens, through that telescope at the Old Testament story, nothing God does is beyond possible when you see his power.
That's what we're learning here is God's ability.
That's right. And we've seen a wide range of things, right? So whether that's material things or life and death, and I think even in the next paragraph, we're going to even see like spiritual power in a tremendous way. So yeah, that's very helpful. Let's go ahead and look at that. Anybody have anything else through 7? Would you like to mention? All right, so looking at verse 7, once when the king of Syria was warring against Israel, he took counsel with his servants, saying, at such and such a place shall be my camp. But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are going down to there. And the king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God told him. Thus he used to warn him so that he saved himself there more than once or twice. So you see that Elisha is, at this moment, Israel's best defense. Better than their armies, it's Elisha. And the mind of the king of Syria was greatly troubled because of this thing. And he called his servants and said to them, will you not show me who of us is for the king of Israel? He thinks there must be a spy in their midst. A traitor, that's right. And one of his servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. And he said, go and see where he is, that I may send and seize him. He knows where you are. He sees you coming, right? Like, that's the issue. It was told him, behold, he is in Dothan, Alabama. No, not Dothan. No. So he sent there horses and chariots and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God, I suppose we're talking about somebody different than Gehazi or Gehazi at this moment. When the servant of the man of God rose early in the morning, maybe I'm wrong about that, but if I am, somebody could show me. But went out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city, and the servant said, alas, my master, what shall we do? He said, do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Now, I just want you to imagine this moment, right? It'd be like this. And look, behold, those who are with us were more than with them. And I just look at 1, 2. But no, look what he says. Then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And when the Syrians came down against him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, please strike this people with blindness. So he struck them with blindness in accordance with the prayer of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, this is not the way, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I will bring you the man whom you seek. And he led them to Samaria. Now, we'll pick up, well, should I go ahead and read the rest of that? As soon as they entered Samaria, Elisha said, O Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. So the Lord opened their eyes, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. As soon as the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elijah, my father, shall I strike them down? Shall I strike them down? He answered, you shall not strike them down. Would you strike down those whom you have taken captive with your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master. So he prepared for them a great feast, and when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away and went to their master. And the Syrians did not come again on raids into the land of Israel. So you've got this incredible picture and this connection between the horses and the chariots. I think probably even connecting to Elijah's time, and then later there will be the proclamation when Elisha is dying, the horses and the chariots of Israel. I think there's this recognition that with these prophets and with their connection to the power of God, that there is a great help and a great defense for Israel. Not everybody was able to have the vision to see the horses and the chariots, but there was a real awareness that there was protection and power that came from God through these men. So I think the key words in this little text are about sight, open, and blindness. So you've got open, opened, blindness, blindness, open, opened, kind of repeated several times through this text. And he brings them right into Samaria. Now, sometimes when we talk about Samaria, we're talking about that whole northern section. We call it Samaria the most in the New Testament. Most of the time we call it Israel in the Old Testament, but Samaria was the designation for that whole area. But Samaria was really the capital city. So he brings them right into the midst of it. They open their eyes and they see they're in the middle. And the king is saying, well, should I just kill them all right now? And what does Elisha say? He says, no. I think basically he's saying you should treat them basically as prisoners of war. Now, maybe he goes even beyond that and prepares not just bread and water, but a great feast before them. This is different. So let me try to parse some things out here. Do you remember that when the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, right? Am I right about that? That he could have been killed by the king of Israel, could have been taken out, and he doesn't do it. Well, you say, well, wasn't that kind of like this situation where he was? I think that would be more of what we would think of as a holy war, a war about a defense of God and His will and things like that. It's different than this, which this is just a conflict over territories or something like that. And as a result of that, I think that there's a higher standard of treatment for the prisoners than it would be if this was. It's not like the War of Canaan, right, where they're going in and cleansing out. The Syrians don't live there; they live somewhere else. I don't think they are subject to the kind of just wipeout that the Canaanites would have been subjected to earlier. Now, there's peace that's made through this. And I think maybe it's through providence and through divine intervention, through Elisha's intervention, the fact that the king doesn't strike them down here, that he treats them well and sends them off. All of that, I think, is the Lord and Elisha, God working through Elisha, I think, really to create peace between Syria and Israel, so that the king of Syria is not continually pursuing Israel, and Israel is not always on its heels from Syria. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, if something I said doesn't make sense, feel free to ask. But what do you think?
So how does this apply to us at all? You know.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I suppose Satan has got an ambush set for us lots of times, and I think there's traps set for us, selfishness, worldliness, all of that stuff, idolatry, and even just doubts and disappointments and sorrows. They can set us back, and if that's going on, remember, I always think about verse 16 there. Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. I want to read 2 Chronicles 32. 2 Chronicles 32, 7 and 8 is basically the same. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or dismayed before the king of Assyria and all the horde that is with him, for there are more with us than with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people took confidence from the words of Hezekiah, king of Judah. We need to keep that in mind. And then the next thing is do what Elisha did. Pray. When you feel like you're overwhelmed, I know I'm not saying that that's the only time you should pray, but I feel like they felt they were overwhelmed there, and we can be overwhelmed with worldly things and worldly people. Pray.
Yeah,
That's the strongest weapon we've got.
Yeah, I wrote Romans 8:31. If God be for us, who can be against us? I think that's kind of like a New Testament echo of this statement, and in that case, I think the Romans were probably either facing or about to face pretty severe persecution. And what does he say? Well, nothing can separate you. And so, in an ultimate sense,
You say God rules in the kingdoms of men.
that's exactly right.
Yeah. Working on my stuff in my Bible class, and I keep thinking that's the thing I'm going to say over and over
Mhm.
again. Too. I'm like,
Yeah.
trying to get that.
That's right. And the interesting thing is, God ruling in the kingdoms of men doesn't always look like maybe we would hope that it looks, right? And from a physical, temporal perspective. But we don't see the big picture, right? We can't even see the middle that we're in, and he sees the beginning, the end from the beginning. And so all that is to say is that when we say God rules in the kingdoms of men, I don't think that what that means is that every leader and ruler is divinely chosen in the sense. I think he lets our free will play out in that a lot, and yet still works his will, still accomplishes his purposes. A Christian can survive in any society, even if they don't literally survive. They can live and be what they're called to be in any kind of government or regime or tyranny or democracy or socialism or capitalism or whatever it is. You know, you can be what you ought to be. And so I think in this case, there's maybe more of an assurance of physical victory because of the kind of kingdom that Israel was, at least at this moment. But it won't always be that. But it's not because it wasn't available. It's because they quit taking advantage of it at some point.
Okay, verse 17 there, when Elisha prayed, he prayed for him, please open his eyes that he may see. We sometimes sing a song that has a verse in it, lift up your eyes and see his great might.
That's good.
So,
That's good.
and that's for spiritual victory.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know this? It reminded me of Romans 12, and in verse 18 it says, if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, will repay. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him drink. For in doing so, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And so, as much as we can, and I think in this, you know, the king could have said, "All right, they're here, let's slaughter them all." But he asked Elisha, and Elisha said, "No.
Yeah.
Treat them good, and send them on their way."
Mm-hmm.
Where did you say that was at?
In Romans 12.
I think it's in Proverbs also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Paul is quoting the Proverbs right on the, if your enemy is hungry, give him drink.
That's the reason I said I had it wrote down for Proverbs.
Yeah, it's good.
Luke 6, I think, has another thought like that. Verse 28 says, bless those who curse you and pray for those who abuse you. And 35 says, love your enemies and do good. And then love your enemies and do good. That's where I was going to stop.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts through, let's say, verse 23? All right. Now, this is a little confusing to me because in verse 24, so you got verse 23, and the Syrians did not come again on the raids into the land of Israel. Verse 24. Afterward, Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, mustered his entire army and went up and besieged Samaria. So what I think is going on is either we're talking about like small raids, just like kind of these small missions headed down into Israel, or notice that the king of Syria is not named specifically previously, and then Ben-Hadad is named. And I don't know if we're talking about maybe a different king. Is that possible that we've transitioned to a new king that is given a name? I don't know. Something changes. There is at least a period of peace where the Syrians aren't raiding. And then Ben-Hadad says, well, we're just going to take the whole army and lay siege on Samaria. So we'll look at that. You want to take us through some of this?
Well,
Or did I get something wrong?
no.
Okay.
Do you think something happened that why did Ben-Hadad do this?
Why did he change his approach?
Yeah, from when there was no raids, and then all of a sudden there's going to be a raid.
Yeah.
Why did that happen?
So you're saying that maybe Israel has engaged in more sin to take them down there? Yeah.
Maybe so.
Yeah. Well, yes. I would just, like, as you're reading it, you know, especially if you don't have your verse break, you know, like if you're reading this before the verses are put in, and the Syrians did not come again on raids in the land of Israel. After Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, mustered his entire army and went up and besieged Samaria. I view it kind of as a size thing, right? Instead of it just being like little Nerf bullets sent. He's just going to bring the whole army all at one time, kind of thing. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I think it probably has to do with their sinfulness. And maybe they quit listening to Elisha on some things.
Okay. Well, we can read those first two verses there. Afterward, Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, mustered his entire army and went up and besieged Samaria. And there was great famine in Samaria as they besieged it until a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver and a fourth part of a cab of the dove's dung for 5 shekels of silver. Conditions are so bad that they ate things that's not even considered food there, I suppose, and paid high prices for it. That's
You got limited real estate on a donkey's head of what I guess it's
Yeah.
straight to the brain.
Yeah.
Right? But
well, I know a fellow that eats cow tongue, so
yeah. I think we all probably do, actually. We don't know that we do, but we probably
not
do.
like this.
Yeah. Well, but the price they're paying for it, right? 80 shekels. I read that a shekel was a month's wage. Is that what?
Yeah, that's what I said. It was they were paying high price.
Yeah. If you're paying 80 shekels, if that's a month's wage, that's like 7 years' pay or something for a donkey's head. And then 5 shekels for a cob of dove's dung. You're talking about this is something that we don't experience, and Lord willing never will have to, is this idea of a siege. This was basically, Samaria was a well-defended city, walls well built. Walls don't help you any if they say, well, y'all can just stay inside there for as long as you want. Because what happens is they're not growing the stuff in the city, right? They live in the city, and then every day the farmers go out to the outskirts of the city and they grow their food and all of that. They would have some reservoirs inside where they would store grain and things like that, but not enough for very long. If you've got everybody in the city having to depend on what you've got in a reservoir for, it won't take a couple of weeks to use all of that up. And so that's what happens here. They use that up, and now they don't have access to other food, and it gets even worse than the description in verse 25. But of course, this was what they would do to Jerusalem when they finally will conquer it. This is what they will do to any major city ultimately in the ancient world, is lay siege to it, and it ends up being almost, it ends up being as devastating as an actual battle, because what happens is the death that occurs inside the city is so horrific, and even the turning on of people on each other to take advantage of whatever little is available, as we'll see here.
Now, as the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, "Help me, help my lord, O king." And he said, "If the Lord will not help you, how shall I help you? From the threshing floor or from the winepress?" Basically, he said, "I'm in the same conditions you're in. I don't have anything." And the king asked her, "What is your trouble?" She answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give your son that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we boiled my son and ate him. And on the next day I said to her, 'Give your son that we may eat him.' But she has hidden her son." When the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his clothes. Now he was passing by on the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth beneath on his body. And he said, "May God do so to me, and more also, if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, remains on his shoulders today." Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. Now the king had dispatched a man from his presence, but before the messenger arrived, Elisha said to the elders, "Do you see how this murderer has sent to take off my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold the door fast against him. Is not the sound of his master's feet behind him?" And while he was still speaking with them, the messenger came down to him and said, "This trouble is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?" I'm not going to comment about the children.
Well, I will say one thing, just if that's okay. I don't want to say it, but I think it needs to be said. In Deuteronomy 28, when God pictures a day when the people have rejected him, this is part of it, right? This is how serious the judgment will be. Is this what God wants? Absolutely not. But this is what it looks like when, and this is one of the things I was talking about, as brutal as it could be. This is one of the things that happens when an ancient civilization would lay siege to another ancient civilization, especially in a society that had lost all its respect for God and his moral will. So anyway, just Deuteronomy 28, 53 through 57, there is a description of this same thing. A lack will lead to this kind of immorality. But anyway, you can keep going on there.
Well, so the conditions are so bad that I assume Jehoram is the king here. He vows to kill Elisha because, I suppose, because he's not called on the Lord for relief.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, he's not going to take the blame for what's going on anyway. He's not going to admit any guilt to sin or anything like that. So what is the message from Jehoram to Elisha there?
You're talking about the end of 33 or in verse 31? I guess both, kind of.
Yeah, there.
Are you saying like, what does he want for Elisha?
Yeah, well, let me just answer my question there. He's let me find my spot here. He's blaming God, basically.
Yes, that's
He's
right.
blaming God, and he's announcing that he's not going to be patient any longer. Did God cause this calamity here, or is he just using it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it's one of those things where the king says, I know this is from the Lord. I'm not going to wait on the Lord any longer. I'm going to take care of this myself. Well, how? And then his response to Elisha is, if his head remains on his shoulders, may the Lord do so to me. And it's like, Elisha, you've already said he's your chief asset. You know how often he has saved you. And now you're treating him like your biggest liability. Like the answer to this situation is to kill Elisha, the one who has access to the horses and chariots of the Lord. And, he's just, it's almost like his moral corruption is so bad that he can't even see clearly about what he ought to be doing in all this.
We're going to see God step in and relieve the
Yeah,
conditions.
That's right.
I don't know if it's the threat against Elisha or because of the children there mentioned, but God's going to step in and relieve it.
Yeah. All right. Anything through chapter 6? Anything else that you want to say about that? Anything you guys want to say?
You're talking about the corruption of the king, but you're talking about the corruption of the people as well. Does it seem like they're calling out to the Lord? for
No.
all this? They're willing to eat their children, but they'd rather do that. It seems like than call out to the Lord in such a way where He would listen.
Yeah.
And so, that's a pretty big disconnect.
Yeah. I will say this. It seems to me so frustrating how flippantly they throw that around about what the Lord is not doing, right? So they come for help, and the king says, if the Lord will not help you, how will I help you? Has he cried out for it? Has he called out to Elisha and said, what do we need to do? What conditions do we need? I mean, we don't have it recorded anyway. When he says in verse 31, may God do so to me and more also. Now, I guess it could be meaning one of the general gods, but that's not the way it seems that he's addressing it. He seems to be talking about the God. And then in verse 33, this trouble is from the Lord. It's almost like when Ahab calls Elijah the trouble of Israel. Now he's calling the Lord the trouble of Israel. Well, why would the Lord be the trouble of Israel? Because Israel's already in trouble. Because Israel's already in a terrible situation. And so it's almost like I was talking about when I said using bad words the other day, when the evolutionists that I heard using God's name as an expletive. It's so frustrating, throwing God's name around like this, like they put their trust in Him, like they believe in Him. If the Lord's not going to help you, how can I? Has anybody called out? I don't know. It doesn't seem to indicate that because Elisha will say in chapter 7 pretty quickly, things are going to be fixed. When I say pretty quickly, we'll see how much in just a second. But may not be able to get all the way through it, but I don't know. We could summarize it.
Verses 1 and 2 right there.
Yeah, let me do that. But Elisha said, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, tomorrow about this time, a seah of fine flour shall be sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. Then the captain on whose hand the king leaned said to the man of God, if the Lord himself should make windows in heaven, could this thing be? But he said, you shall see it with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it. So he's saying, tomorrow a seah of fine flour shall be sold for a shekel, and a seah of barley for a shekel. If I understand correctly, according to like Babylonian documents, normally 1 shekel would buy 15 sheahs. But the times are so bad that tomorrow 1 shekel buying a seah and 1 shekel buying 2 seahs was going to be a remarkable change, right? When you're paying multiple shekels for donkey's heads, then anything is better than that. And so the fact that there would be seahs of barley at all available is really remarkable. Now, notice what the captain, who I assume is the messenger here, notice what he says. Even if God made windows in heaven, and we kind of get that flood language, if he brought a flood of rain, right, in the middle of this famine/siege, what would that help?
Flood of food.
A flood of food. Yeah, that's right. He's saying it wouldn't matter if God opened up the heavens. It wouldn't make that big of a difference. And so Elisha will say, okay, it's going to happen. You're going to see that it's happened, but you're not going to get a bite. And we'll see how all that works out. So the food will be made much more available. He's saying not even a heavy rain, and I didn't even think about the fact that he may be talking about manna or something. Not even that would fix the situation. But then he's saying, we will fix the situation. The Lord will take care of the situation, but you're not going to get to taste of it.
Going by and saying flour and barley.
Oh, yes.
Grain.
Yes, that's right. That's right. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, let's say something about Elisha saying, "Hear the word of the Lord."
Yeah.
Okay, this is not coming from some farm report or anything like that, or any spy or anything. It's coming directly from the Lord. So,
yeah,
that's about all.
No, that's good. That's good. And we're going to see that at the end of this section. That's going to be the emphasis is on how God's words are fulfilled in this, so that you can trust God's word, you can believe His promises, you can have hope in that, and you don't want to deny His word like the captain does
Yeah,
here.
that's what I was going to say. Was he expressing doubt there, or
I think he was saying, I don't see how it's possible.
yeah, it's not going. You don't believe it.
Yeah.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah. All right, so we got about 5 minutes. Let's try to see these fellows in. Can I just summarize it, or do you want me to read it? What would you rather me do? All right. So you've got these 4 lepers, and they're sitting outside the city, and they're not allowed to go in the city, but now they're sitting there, and normally they'd be looking at the army that's surrounding them. And they say, let's go over to the Syrians, and if they spare us, we'll live, and if they don't, we'll die, but we're going to die anyway. They had probably just depended on benevolence from the city anyway or whatever, so they're like, we're going to die anyway. So they go into the camp of the Syrians, and what do they see? Nothing. Nobody. Yeah. Maybe I should say nobody, but it's not nothing, right? They see all the stuff that the Syrian army had left behind. It says the Lord had made the army of the Syrians hear the sound of chariots and horses. Maybe these are the spiritual horses and chariots that they're hearing. And they said to one another, behold, the king of Israel has hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Egypt to come against us. So they abandoned their stuff. These lepers come, they sit in a tent, they eat, they drink, they get all the silver and gold they want, they get the clothing, they hid them, they come back, they entered another tent, do all the same things. And then I love this in verse 9. They said to one another, we are not doing right. Here are guys who are the outcasts. They're on the margins of society. And they say, we are not doing right. This is a day of good news. That's the Old Testament word that will be translated in some places, like in Isaiah, as gospel. This is a gospel day. This is a victory day. So they say, we need to go back and we need to tell the gatekeepers that the Syrians are gone. It's a wonderful illustration. I remember, I don't know if you ever met him, but Drew Jones, he used to be one of the... he interned or preacher trained or whatever at College View in Florence. And when I was in college there, he preached a lesson on this. We are not doing it right. This is a day of good news. And basically he applied this to us. You know, we're all lepers who have found treasure and food and benefits and blessings. We have been saved from our bad circumstances. And how many of us enjoy those blessings and don't tell anybody else about it? And so he said, those lepers that we're not doing right, this is a day of good news. That's the idea that every one of us should have. That this is a day of good news because we have received blessings. The enemy has been defeated. We just received the blessings of life now. So we should be telling the people in the city who are still suffering under the besiegement of the good news. And so that's what they're going to do. And they say, first of all, some of them will say this is a big trick, right? But then they'll say, they kind of have the same attitude as the lepers. Well, we're going to die anyway. One way or the other, we're going to die. So they say, well, let's go out and look. And they do. And after this is verse 15. So they went after them as far as Jordan. Behold, all the way was littered with the garments and equipment that the Syrians had thrown away in their haste. And the messengers returned and told the king. So notice this in verse 16. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Syrians. So a seah of fine flour was sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord, just like had been said. Now the king had appointed the captain on whose hand he leaned to have charge of the gate, and the people trampled him in the gate so that he died, as the man of God had said when the king came down to him. You hear that? The fulfillment of the word is being, so verse 16 really fulfills the first part. Verse 17 fulfills the second part. For when the man of God had said to the king, 2 seahs of barley shall be sold for a shekel, and a seah of fine flour for a shekel. But about this time the morrow, the gate of Samaria. The captain had answered the man of God, if the Lord himself should make windows in heaven, could such a thing be? And he said, you shall see it with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it. So it happened to him, for the people trampled him in the gate, and he died. So he saw it, but the people were so excited to get to it, they trampled him. So he was able to see it, but not taste it. And that's what happens when we doubt the word of God. There will come a day where we will see the fulfillment of the promise and not be able to partake of it. If we don't listen and trust and obey what God has said, we will see that we will hear the trumpet sound. We will see the coming. We will be resurrected one way or the other. But then we won't get the taste of the blessings and the glory. That's a pretty powerful application, don't you think?
So I had it wrote down.
All right, we're out of time. We got some young ones ready to come in, and so that'll be where we leave off for tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.